Slowly people are coming into the webinar. Hello and welcome. Welcome back to many of you as well. Thank you for joining us live today for day 2 of the summit. I'm sure you're all keen and eager to get cracking. As many of you are, say hello in the comments or the chat, the webinar chat. Say where you're from, who you are, etc. So everyone can get to know you, and do good by saying hello. All right, some of you may be new today, so we'll do a quick recap. My name is Dr. Graham Spacey, and I'm your compare, and I'm here to introduce the sessions, link the discussions together, and keep us moving through the summit journey. We're supported today again by Yasmin Marriott from InFocus, who will be posting messages and ensuring things run smoothly in the background. And of course, you've just seen Damien, who's our host with the most. Just a reminder of some housekeeping. Please do use the chat function throughout, comment, make reflections, introduce yourself. Make full use of the emojis, reactions, and the interaction tools too, as it really helps keep the sessions lively and connected. Please ask questions. Lots of questions that were asked yesterday and answered, some live, some in the chat, and some will be posted in the forum on the private community space. The Q&A function is at the bottom. If you can't see it at the bottom of your screen, click on the 3 dots in the circle. It says more, and it should reveal itself, hopefully, fingers crossed, technology. Everyone can see and comment what you've questioned, and they can upvote with the thumbs up. We will try and answer as many questions as possible during the session, either live, as I said, or by responding there and then, or later in the community. And bringing you full circle back to the community. If you haven't already, please sign up for the private community space. It's free to everyone here, and it's where you will find the sessions, the recordings, the resources that are provided, as well as further discussions, and introduce yourself on there as well. And we're also going to be using Mentimeter today, the interactive tool we used yesterday, and we love to use it in webinars. So today's link has just been dropped, or will be dropped in to the chat now. So if you want to get ahead of yourself and prepare, go to mentimeter.com or click on that link and set yourself up. You might find it easier and better to do it on your mobile phone, so you can still watch on one screen and interact on the other. So if you're all sitting comfortably, let's begin. Yesterday helped us get grounded. Today is about seriousness, serious face. What still needs answering? Where are the unresolved questions? And what does responsible adoption still require in terms of vigilance, sharing, shared learning, and practical safeguards? So I'm very pleased to welcome back Damien Hatton to open day 2 with the first session. Damien will help us reset the tone and frame today's discussion around what remains unresolved and why shared vigilance matters. Over to you, Damien.
I will indeed, Graham. Thank you, and welcome back, everybody. I'm delighted that so many people have been able to make it back, and I'm sure some more will trickle in as we get going. But yes, we're on to day 2. So let me share. I think I'm sharing. Yes, I'm sharing. So, yesterday was really about, as Graham said, creating a kind of shared orientation. The goal was not to make anyone technical in a single day. It was to make AI really feel less abstract, less mystical, a bit more grounded in the realities of impact measurement and management. And I think where we got to yesterday was we established that AI can support real IMM work and is supporting real IMM work in practice. We established that context determines usefulness. And we established that human judgment makes outputs much more credible and is actually an essential ingredient. And that's the important place for us to begin, really, because if day 1 was about understanding the potential, hence the title here, potential to practice, today is going to be about something a little bit harder and hopefully more useful even. It's about the practice. It's about where things become more demanding, and it's about what responsible use actually requires once we move beyond those kind of first impressions that we get of what the potential is. So what we tested overnight. So yesterday I did share a simple overnight experiment, and at the end of yesterday's session, I kind of ran you through it for anyone who wanted to try it out. The point of the experiment was not really to see whether AI could produce an answer. We already know that it can. It's always going to produce an answer for you. The point was to test something more important, but it was actually about, can we trust the process behind, the result that's coming? So the workflow that I shared was deliberately constrained and bounded. It asked people to work through with a fixed set of resources. There was 4 qualitative survey responses, interview responses, a defined question, an explicit step, and then a short checked summary. In other words, the experiment was designed to shift your attention away from output alone and towards the process quality. So from, can the tool generate something plausible, to, is it evidence linked what's coming out? Is it reviewable? And is it good enough for you to stand behind and feel it's credible? And I realize that many people may not have had a chance to actually do that. And, I won't ask for feedback right now. If you've got some, please go ahead and drop into the chat. But, or inside of the community space, I think, again, our theme today that's going to run through today is co-learning and co-production. So if you did and you had some insights, please post it inside of the community. We'd love to hear about that. So the important thing is not whether you all completed it. The important thing is really the mindset, if you like, behind it, because the mindset really kind of takes us directly into today and what we're trying to achieve today. So we're moving, as I've said, potential to practice. And that means focusing on 4 things. Where can AI go wrong? What needs verification specifically? How workflows must change? And what responsible use looks like in practice. And that's the shift really for today. Yesterday, we got clear on what AI can do. Today, a bit more demanding. What does it take to use it well without weakening the work? So one of the questions that came up yesterday as well was about privacy. I think it was a really fundamental point as well that leads into today as well. So I posted overnight as well about that. So specifically worried about how, or the question was, how worried should we be in using tools like ChatGPT, NotebookLM, which was demonstrated, and similar large language models. And I've added that fuller response into the lab for anyone who wants to go in and read it. You should have got the post about that. But the short version, if you like, is privacy, risk, and trust are not best understood as a simple yes and no answer. It's more about whether a given tool is actually safe. They're better understood as workflow and governance questions. So it's part of a broader response you really need to this question of privacy. Is the workflow holding up, and is there a broader governance framework around it? So what you're putting in, for what purpose, with what safeguards, and is it a sensible use of AI for this particular task that you're defining with the data in the context that you're working? So it's a broader question. That's my response really in a nutshell. And that's usually usually a better question is, what are you putting into the AI? Because not every AI supported task carries the same risk level with it. Okay, so that again is a very kind of day 2 question, and that's why I kind of responded to that. But let's start right now. We've got our Mentimeter. Hopefully you've all jumped into Mentimeter. Let's start with where you are right now. Before we go any further, let me just bring up Mentimeter and the first question in there. Which best describes you after day one? Just a quick check-in note, really, this one. Can you see clearly opportunities already? Are you interested but cautious? Are you unsure what I'd actually use this for yet? Concerned about risks, privacy, accuracy, or I need a clearer starting point? So just a few different orientations. Which best describes you? I'll take a moment for you to just reflect upon that. Of course, if you're brand new today and you weren't here yesterday, then this is a tricky one to answer. Well, you might answer it as you are right now coming in today too, without the context of yesterday. Great. And I hope you've all managed to get into Mentimeter. It's useful if you're on your own computer, but you can still go in on your phone as well and join in on these questions. So we've got a lot. I can see clear opportunities already. So that's a real bucket that is standing out from the rest, which is great. I mean, and that was really our focus yesterday. What is the potential here? What are the opportunities? But a growing group there is, I'm concerned about the risks, privacy, accuracy, and that's what we hopefully flagged up as well. There's lots, there are different areas of risk that need to be thought about, and that's part of today. But this is a healthy place to be as a group, a spread of both, cautious and interested, unsure, no clear starting point. All of this is really, as a group, if we're engaged in this topic of, really trying to get to grips with where our AI should be used, having this spread is perfect. So thank you for that. That's a fabulous, I'm going to shift us back to now. That's a good point. Did I actually even share the results there? Let me do that. It's on the screen. So I'm seeing the results here of Mentimeter. I don't know whether you get these on your side, but this is where that poll, that straw poll just landed there. Okay. Let me just share back to my original screen. So how today fits together. Let me just walk you through what's planned, because these sessions are not sort of independent, separate sessions as such. They fit together as an overall conversation. And they build on each other. So we begin with learning as a field, and that's going to be a session that myself and Graham actually cover, because this is something that we're going to be leading on moving forward, the international field study. And that session matters because it's still an emerging area. We do not yet have the settled norms for all of this behavior around AI. We don't yet have all the answers. And we do not strengthen this practice simply by experimenting in isolation. But it's more about building a collective understanding over time. So this session is really about shared evidence and sharing learning, why collective learning matters, and how the field can start building understanding over time rather than lots of disconnected work. And so from there, we're going to go into the infrastructure reality. And we've got Asidas and Zach who are joining us, two terrific speakers from Vera Solutions. And the reason why this sits there quite deliberately as a session about broader technical infrastructure of the social sector, because it's a field, if the field is actually going to be serious about kind of making trustworthy progress, then the infrastructure actually question becomes unavoidable. It's one thing to show that AI can help in sort of bounded workflows in isolation, but it's another thing to entirely ask whether the wider system around us is actually credible and can be used at scale. So this session is actually about why systems and standards matter, why fragmentation creates problems, why interoperability of systems and what you might collect your data through one particular platform or one particular application, but it's fragmented, and why trust depends not just on these individual behaviors, but on the wider conditions within which you're operating. So it's going to be a really interesting session to look at the kind of infrastructure challenges that actually exist right now. And if we want to make credible progress, we have to care not only about what users do, but also about the environment in which your work is happening inside of. Okay, so that's the first two major sessions. The third session that we're going to go into is when the context gets harder. And we've got Ali and Yasmin are going to run this session. And it's about where the context increases risk. You know, what does responsible look like when the pressures change? You know, when, you know, contexts are more challenging, when you've got resource constraints, you've got greater risks. These are when the stakes really go up, and adapting practice into those real world constraints is important. And then we've got the fourth major session is the big unanswered questions panel. And we're inviting back David and Dan from yesterday, if you were with us, two great speakers. And we've also got Khalil and Elizabeth joining that panel. So we've got four terrific people. I'll be moderating it and asking some tricky questions about what remains unresolved, where the field still needs clarity, and opening the conversation up beyond the summit in terms of what's coming next. So that's, I think, exactly the right shape for today. We'll close off with a brief reflection at the end of this, but it's really, as I say, moving into, you know, the territory of some more tricky questions associated with practice. Are there any questions? I don't know whether any questions are surfacing in the Q&A there, Yasmin or Graham, but happy to answer any of those. If not, we'll go on to our first session.
Nothing pertinent at the moment, Damien, but it's a good reminder that if you do have any questions, pop them in the Q&A section. So thanks, Damien. So one of the main ways the field will answer those questions is through shared evidence and structured learning. This is exactly where we're going to go next. So now for something I touched on this yesterday in my introduction and promised to get back to you on it, and that is the International Field Study. So day two is about shared vigilance, and the International Field Study is one of the main practical engines behind that. It is the mechanism through which lived practice gets turned into usable guidance, decision frameworks, and emerging good practice. So I'm going to ask Damien to come and join me for this session. Together, we hope to bring the combination of academic rigor, practical experimentation, and ecosystem leadership to the International Field Study.
Great. And this is really coming at this, Graham, with your university hat on, as well as, you know, being an experienced researcher from the field for many, many years. So this is, as Graham said, it's our structured effort to really document as we go. David touched on it yesterday as well, that this idea of evaluating AI, not just using AI for evaluation, but actually switching the dynamic there. And he went all the way to India to learn that particular lesson. But we really need to embed that in here from the outset. So this is about how AI is being used and developing ultimately some practical guidance and grounded real experience, you know, that's grounded in real experience. And this is going to be part of the Impact Intel Labs, work on responsible AI enabled IMM, so that we're not just creating things on the fly, experimenting and not reflecting on whether they're working or not, but we're actually having a strong lens on are two things being preserved, or one thing being preserved in particular, which is quality, which is ensuring that as a minimum, the same quality that you might, if you like, using traditional methods, it's preserved when using AI. And presumably some of the advantage of speed and reducing the amount of work burden on people is also enhanced, that those two dynamics are working together. And that's our kind of primary lens. But under what circumstances do or don't those things happen? So, over to you, Graham.
Thanks. So the starting point is straightforward. AI is already being used in IMM, or impact measurement and management, but without shared norms or consistent practice. I think these 4 words on the slide capture the current reality quite well, really. First of all, uneven. AI is appearing across the IMM cycle, but adoption is patchy and highly context dependent. Second, it is informal. A lot of current use is ad hoc. It's being driven by individual initiative, not by shared standards or common processes. Third, it is ungoverned. Perhaps ungovernable, but we shall see. The review processes and safeguards vary widely and in some cases are absent altogether. And fourth, it's accelerating. Experimentation is moving faster than the field's ability to learn from it. We are the field, and this is our attempt to learn from it. So the issue is not that people are doing the wrong thing by experimenting, it's that the experimentation on its own does not yet create a reliable practice base. There's no evidence yet.
So the challenge is really not whether to use AI. It's actually knowing when, how, and with what safeguards it should be utilized. And that's where the sort of harder judgment sits. Where is our AI appropriate in terms of the risks and stakes that vary quite significantly across different tasks that you might be undertaking? Where must human judgment stay closest? Because some decisions require that oversight, regardless of a tool's capability. What checks are proportionate, because safeguards should really match against the stakes, not follow a single template for everything. And how do we account for these choices? Because credible practice means being able to show what was our reasoning behind it, not just the actual end output. And so that really is the challenge. It's not tool access, it's about judgment.
Thanks, Damien. So this is where the gap sits, at the task level. Principles already exist, as we heard yesterday, but practical decision support does not yet exist in a strong enough form. Ethical frameworks are proliferating, which is useful, but they often operate at a level of abstraction that is hard to apply in real life decisions. Tools are multiplying. There's so much out there, but there are still no widely shared norms for when and how to use them responsibly in specific tasks, MEL tasks. And task level guidance is thin, which means practitioners are often making consequential choices without enough support or knowledge. And documented examples are scarce. So what works in practice is still not being captured in a form that others can learn from, hence our community. So the missing layer is not more principles, it is useful guidance at the point of decision.
Okay, sorry. So what is the International Field Study? Well, at its core, it's a structured documentation of real practice, not speculation. So it's a participatory field study is how it's designed to be intended to be designed, drawing on real AI use in IMM settings. Designed to do three things really. First of all, map current AI use across the IMM cycle. Second is identify risks, decision points, and safeguards. And thirdly, to develop a practical framework for those task level decisions that we've actually talked about. So this is not about kind of standing back and theorizing from a distance. It's about learning from what practitioners are actually doing, what you're actually doing in actual fact, where risks are arising and what responsible use seems to require in a particular context. So the context is also important to track and be aware of.
Right, thanks. So how will the study work? I hear you cry, how will it work? The proposed approach to the study is iterative, practitioner-led, and grounded in real use. And when we say practitioner, we're hoping that includes you. And of course, this isn't solid. It may evolve and adapt as we move on, which is why it's iterative. So our plan is that it starts with the baseline survey. This will map current AI use across participating organizations. We'll then move on to case studies to document real decisions, risks, and safeguards in depth. What's worked, what hasn't worked, why, what's the context? From there, will be working groups. These will help test emerging frameworks and practitioners. They'll actually go out, use AI in real life, and come back and tell us the results. And then we'll synthesize. This will bring that learning together to produce decision useful guidance, real life guidance that we can use. So the flow is quite deliberate. We don't see it changing. It may adapt as we go along. We start by mapping out what is happening, then we study it more closely, then we test what is emerging, and then we turn that into something useful we can all use. The key principle here is simple. It's about learning from practice and not speculating from a distance.
So what should this produce, or what we hope we're going to be producing over time? And in actual fact, this summit forum is a great place for us to come back and present what's being produced. So that's part of the intention here of running this first summit as something that may have an annual cadence to it, so that we can bring back some of this information as we go. So it basically starts, we're designing it to include this decision framework, so a practical guidance on where AI is appropriate and where extra caution might actually be needed. Case studies and field notes, so real examples drawn from documented practitioner experience. You know, one of the reasons why we're bringing you together in that, we keep going on about the community. It's so important that we come together as a group and share these experiences. And if you are sharing them in a structured way, which is what we hope to move into with this field study, we can capture those and share those in a documented way, and in a way that people can, you know, really see themselves in other people's practice and how they might transfer some of that usefulness. So example workflows. So we've created a whole range of workflows that are kind of reusable templates, verification prompts that take you through. If you were here yesterday, we presented the sort of 12 steps to impact measurement and management, which were broadly about designing your system and then building a measurement system, and then collecting data, analyzing it, reporting on it, and then learning from it to enhance. So across that kind of workflow, where, you know, what are the kind of useful templates and processes to follow? And yesterday I talked about where the friction comes is between those steps. But also clear, honest boundaries. So clear guidance on what really are the limits. And, not just possibilities. So the point is not simply to describe the field, it's to produce guidance that changes how your decision making is actually going to evolve over time in terms of your usage. So why does this matter now? Well, at the moment, we want to move really from this position of isolated kind of experimentation to a more structured, shared learning approach. And it can really sort of hopefully then, support more defensible decisions because practitioners will be better able to justify their AI choices with documented evidence. Right now, we don't quite know how to position AI in workflows with, if you're being commissioned to do a piece of work. It's a tricky conversation, and that will normalize over time. We also want to reduce inconsistency and avoidable risk because clearer norms make consequential errors less likely. And it also offers a practical route to responsible adoption. So because it's grounded in what's real and real organizations are actually doing, not in the sort of ideal conditions world. So that's why we're so keen to engage, such a diverse range of organizations who have been joining yesterday and today into this effort, because contexts are very, very different from one place to the next.
Thanks. And before I move on, we have had a question which is about risk order and a scale, etc. And this is exactly what this study is looking into. We don't have those risk scales. We don't know what is risky yet or what isn't. We have some of that, but not all of it. And that's exactly what this study is doing. It's getting that real evidence so we can give that practical guidance and support to our peers. So how can you be involved? The final point is that this will only be useful if it reflects real practice. Therefore, participation matters. How can you get involved? There are different ways people can contribute, and we hope many of you will. You might respond to the baseline survey, which hopefully will go out soon. You might join a working group, for example. You might contribute into a case study. Or you might help test emerging tools and share what you found. You might even do it all. Not everyone needs to contribute in the same way, but the stronger the connection to real practice is, the more useful the outputs from this study will be. So this is not just something to observe and wait for it, a piece of paper to come out to tell you what to do. It's about getting involved. It is something the field can, and I truly believe should, help shape. We should be at the core of it, us collectively.
Yeah. So that's it in a nutshell, or a rather long nutshell, that one. But we wanted to just lay out the structure to this field study. And the aim is to help move AI in impact measurement from isolated experimentation towards something more practical, more defensible as a practice that we're undertaking, and more shared in terms of some of those norms and protocols. Okay, so I don't know whether, let me stop sharing there, whether we've got any questions that are emerging out of that piece. I know Tatiana's added one question that Graham's answered, but if you do have any further questions about that, please do feel free to drop them into the community and we'll answer them. And just as yesterday, as you put, at the end of yesterday, somebody posed a question around privacy issues. If you put a question up, we will answer it. You'll get a comprehensive feedback on that. Okay, back to you, Graham.
Great, thanks. So if shared learning matters, then so does the underlying infrastructure that makes responsible progress possible. That is our next step, and it's what we're going to talk about next. So responsible progress does not only depend on individual judgment, it also depends on stronger underlying infrastructure. So this next session takes us up a level and asks what better interoperability. Oh, I knew I was going to mess that up. This session takes us up a level and asks what better interoperability, standardization, and systems design makes possible. So I'm very pleased to introduce someone I met a long time ago in South Africa when he was working for Grassroots Soccer, and I'm not sure that he even remembers me. Zach Kaufman, hello, welcome. He's the co-founder and CEO of Vera Solutions, and he's joined by Acidus Blauvelt, hello, who's the Senior Director of Engineering and Innovation at Vera Solutions. So together, they bring a strong systems, infrastructure, and responsible technology lens to this question of what enables trustworthy progress at scale. So welcome, gentlemen, and over to you.
Thanks so much, Graham. Great to be with everybody today. Great to see you again, Graham, after far too long. So really excited to be part of the summit, and great to see there's so much interest in these topics. Acidus and I are really energized to talk about IMM infrastructure today, the challenges that we're all facing, the current status quo of IMM infrastructure. I think I need to be able to share my screen. Let's see if there we go. All right, give me one moment. I'll pop my screen open. That should come through now. Right. So we're excited to talk today about some of the challenges in the current reality that we're all living in with regard to IMM infrastructure. We want to ground that in our journey, Acidus and I, and the journey that we've been on over the last 20 years, and some of the lessons we've learned, some of the struggles we've faced along the way. And we also want to share a little bit at the end about a new initiative we're working on, a sort of vision of how things might work differently in the future, and really an invitation to join us in that, or help us steer the direction that might go, if folks are interested. And I think there's opportunity to connect it to all the great initiatives that Damien and Graham and others have going here. So without further ado, my name is Zach Kaufman. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Vera Solutions. Joined by Acidus, who's our Senior Director of Engineering and Innovation. I'll let him do a proper introduction in a second. Just setting the stage here, we are really in a reality where all of the systems that we use day to day in the IMM space are really siloed and disconnected. The sector collectively is spending over 150 million hours a year in impact reporting, and getting impact data from whatever format it sits into whatever format or formats it needs to be in, for our funders, our boards, our donors, and our different stakeholders. And so our reality and my lived reality, having started my career working in Grassroots Soccer, overseeing monitoring and evaluation for our programs in Sub-Saharan Africa many moons ago, looked a lot like this. And I think things lived a lot more on paper back then than they did, but we were often digging through piles of paper, through spreadsheets, trying to get data into all the different places it needed to be. So I'll share a little bit more about that journey. Where we think the sector might get to, with rainbows and sunshine, is a future that looks much more connected, as Graham said, interoperable, where data can flow much more seamlessly, and be shared much more seamlessly, but also securely, and carefully and intentionally between all the different stakeholders who need access to impact data. So this is a vision we're really energized about. We're very mindful of and grappling with the reality that we're in day to day at Vera, and we'll share a little bit more about what we do and how we're grappling with that. But we think that there's a lot of opportunity on the horizon if the sector can come together and start to address some of the systemic challenges with regard to the IMM infrastructure. And it's not going to be done by any one organization or we think any one platform. It's going to take an entire movement to change how we all work. So I'll hand to Acidus. We'll talk about the session structure quickly. So first, we'll unpack the challenge through kind of our respective journeys. We'll just share a little bit about where we've come from and the journeys we've been on, challenges we've faced in different organizations and roles we've served in over the years. We'll take a deeper dive into the status quo of what IMM infrastructure looks like today and how disconnected and siloed everything is, why that's the case, and how it works. And then we'll look at what shared impact data infrastructure might look like, and then kind of opportunity for Q&A discussion and ways folks can get involved. Please do bring questions in and ideas in. We want this to be as interactive as possible. And I'll hand over to Acides to do a quick intro and share a little bit about his journey and his background, some of the struggles he's wrestled with in this space over the years, and what he's working on these days.
Sure. Thanks, Zach. So myself, I've more than 20 years, closer to 25, working on data systems, initially in the private sector, working on data warehouses, integration, harmonizing different data sources. And then about 15 years ago, I stepped into the international development sector, working as CTO of an organization across 7 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. We're doing a lot of ICT for D initiatives, but using standard tools, ODK, ONA, Kobo Toolbox to do data collection. Good tools. They solve the collection problem, but kind of not the other end. And then later on with my work with UN Global Pulse, which is focused on data and AI for the UN Secretary General, they had the same issues. So it's always a breakdown at the end of the funnel, where aggregation, cleaning, and then getting data into a usable form was something that could take weeks or months or not happen at all. So by the time the picture is clear, you've kind of lost your opportunity. So in addition to that, I'm working on my PhD currently, focused on AI usage in the social sector in sub-Saharan Africa. So focused on a lot of these issues we're talking about: risk, workflows. What does responsible use of AI mean for the nonprofit sector? So I'm really interested to hear everyone else's perspective as well. But yeah, it's me.
Nice. And I think my background jives with Acides', I think, a bit less technical, because I found myself, I came from a public health and epidemiology background. So when I joined Grassroots Soccer in 2006 and then moved over to South Africa in 2008, my role was entirely focused on monitoring and evaluation, MEL, MEAL, MERL, IMM, whatever you want to call it. But I was that guy who was managing all of the data and the data that was flowing through the organization. And so that was kind of the early days of my career. It really revolved around this jump drive that I was given back in 2008 by a colleague that had all the spreadsheets and all the data that we had been managing since the organization got started, for tracking all the programs that we're running, all the participants coming through our programs. Now, this day and age, this looks kind of like an antiquated, not the reality we're in now. Yet I think a lot of the journey still rings true in terms of how siloed and file oriented things are. So I'll share a little bit about kind of what the journey we went on there looked like, and then what that then translated to beyond it. So if you go back to 2008, we were really drowning in just dead data. So we had spreadsheets upon spreadsheets that were really being populated with data manually counted from paper forms that were collected through daily attendance and quizzes, questionnaires, that kind of data. So things that you would now, Grassroots Soccer does now, and many organizations would now do on mobile devices with offline data collection tools, we were doing on paper, and then bringing that data once a quarter into spreadsheets like this. So there was a lag on information. And we had these unwieldy spreadsheets. We could only answer questions that were that the spreadsheet was set up to answer, right? And so this was sort of the early days of trying to kind of strengthen IMM or MEL within this one organization. So if you map out the infrastructure or the system that we had within our organization, it looked like this. So in the field, it was paper spreadsheets, local program sites. We had just stacks of paper, right? Questionnaires and registers. Excel spreadsheets at the local sites, a big monster Excel spreadsheet that was on my jump drive that I needed to now take over at HQ. And then we had to report to about a dozen different funders in mostly PDFs, but occasionally in some different portals and whatnot. And so this kind of data flow was kind of up the pyramid. And so there were a lot of problems with this, right? So first is there's no feedback loops. So staff felt like they were being policed. They never saw what came from the data that they were putting a lot of time and energy into collecting and digitizing. The second are that mistakes are getting made at every level, right? Because you've got manual data collection, manual data entry. Humans just are not great at that. So humans are going to make mistakes. Data quality is going to suffer as a result. The other issue here was we weren't digitizing the individual level data. And so, that's going to, again, create further data quality issues. And we can only answer questions that we thought to answer in the first, that we thought to kind of ask in the first place with the Excel structure that we had set up. And then the other problem was we needed to 10x this. So we were bringing in funding from the US government that was coming in the next year, and we needed to get our program from 5,000 kids a year to 50,000 kids a year. And this system, this infrastructure we had really didn't scale. And so what we did was we overhauled it. We moved it onto Salesforce. And you could do this with many different technologies. This is not a plug for Salesforce as the solution. But this was, we found it to be a very a flexible platform that we could work with. Everything that made Salesforce great for capturing donor and donation data also made it really great for tracking program and participant data and outcome data. And so we were able to get from this model where it was a long lag of data for 3 months to getting real-time data in a dashboard into dashboards that everybody in the organization had access to, right? And so we're kicking out these dashboards to everybody from the volunteers in the field to the CEO and the boardroom, having the data at their fingertips to be able to answer questions around what's going on in the program, how are we doing against our targets, how do the kids in the program break down by sex, by age, by month, by site, et cetera. So that was really valuable. That was really valuable information. I think more in the monitoring side of M&E than in the evaluation side. Separately, we were doing a lot of really important work running randomized control trials and other kinds of studies. So this is an organization that really thought very critically about its impact and evaluating its work, but really was our systems and our infrastructure that was holding us back. Once we got onto a better system, it massively changed how we worked, and other organizations started coming to us and saying, that's what we need. How do we make that leap? How do we strengthen our systems, strengthen our infrastructure, and do more with the data that we're putting all this time and energy into collecting? And so that's how Vera got started. I won't spend much time here. If you don't know Vera, we're a global team working to amplify the impact of the social sector using cloud and mobile tech. Our team is all over the globe. We worked with about 450 organizations since we got started, and have had the privilege of really just seeing the sector through lots of different organizations' eyes, from funders to international NGOs to local grassroots NGOs as well. So that's really how Vera, where Vera came from. And how we got started. But the reality is, Vera's, a lot of our work has revolved around Salesforce or Salesforce adjacent tools. We built a tool called AMP Impact, which is this native layer that sits on top of Salesforce for impact data and program and project data. But tools like Salesforce and even AMP Impact as well, they really only help solve data flow within organizations. And in order to strengthen the infrastructure, the IMM infrastructure, we need to start moving beyond just trying to fix data flow within our organizations. That is an area where there's still a lot of work to do for many organizations, and there's tools that can help with that. And AI can certainly help with that as well. But there's a huge opportunity in front of us in the sector if we can figure out how to drive better data flow between organizations to make it easier and faster and more automated for data to get from one organization's tool or tools or systems into the tool or tools or systems used by their funders, their partners, their other stakeholders, and so on. So we'll talk about what that might look like in the future, what a future state could look like. But I think before there, we need to really make sure we understand the current state and the current status quo, which looks something like this, right? We've got this hodgepodge, disconnected infrastructure of tools and technologies. You've got all of Microsoft tools and different kinds of files, maybe living on SharePoint or OneDrive, or maybe you've got Google, maybe you've got Google Drive or Google Sheets instead of Excel, but and Google Forms. But it's still that's often disconnected from the databases that sit in the middle, whether that's Salesforce or Airtable or other kinds of Asana or other tools that might be used for managing the kind of relational data that an organization might need. You've got mobile data collection tools like Kobo and ODK and Comcare and a zillion other mobile data collection tools, and maybe they feed into Google Sheets, or maybe you've pipelined them all the way over here to your business intelligence tools like Power BI or Tableau or Looker or Superset, but there isn't usually a strong connection that relies on a really good data, like a sustainable and adaptable data infrastructure. We've got tools for collaboration that are rarely connected, and you've got data warehouses, data lakes on AWS or Azure or other tools, and then you've got grant management systems that ultimately we need to report into. And none of this is I don't want to say none of it, but much of this is disconnected and siloed. And so we're wasting so much time as a sector formatting and reformatting and bringing our data from this structure into that structure and from these spreadsheets into that portal. And I lived that. That was my reality. Whilst we could improve the systems that we had internally for tracking our data and managing our data, we still had to manually report to funders at the end of the day. And so if we map out kind of the IMM needs, tools, and data flow across the levels of our different stakeholders across the globe, it looks something like this. And there's many more tools. This is really just intended to be illustrative, but you have different needs at different levels. So from the point of service at the grassroots level, we're focused on intake, on surveys, attendance, site visits. We're really tracking that day-to-day transactional data at that point of service. And many organizations, using tools like Kobo or Comcare, or Magpie or other mobile data collection tools to run those surveys. Certainly, we can drive better data quality when we're digitizing at the point of collection compared to using paper and all the challenges associated with that. Moving up from that level, you've got the local office where we still want participant level analytics and insights, but we need to be tracking services and really doing that probably in more of a relational database. So tools like Comcare, Salesforce, you could have other, Airtable or other tools that are going to provide a more relational structure to the data will be helpful. TeamPact is a good example of like an attendance taking tool. There's many examples again at this level where you can kind of connect the local level to the point of service. But then where it starts to become challenging is a different set of tools comes into play when we then move to national, regional offices and the headquarters. Here we're starting to use more dashboards, spreadsheets, files, creating PDFs and PowerPoints, needing to move into MIS tools like, AMP Impact or DHIS2 or Activity Info or other tools like that. And then ultimately funders are then asking us to, report into their portals or send us their PDFs in their format or whatever they might need, right? And maybe we need to report into our website, our annual impact report into the International Aid Transparency Initiative or other sources. So, the reality is that these flows in some cases can be automated. In many cases, they're quite manual, and mistakes. This is another version of the same problem that I had way back when in 2008, right? It's all these different levels, manual aggregation, and mistakes getting made, data quality suffering as a result. If we look at kind of how things have progressed, the bulk of innovation in the last decade, in the 2010s, was really at this local level. And there's a massive amount of improvement and innovation at this level with new mobile data collection tools, very affordable open source mobile data collection tools. So, there's a big shift that occurred during the 2010s from paper being very normal in the decade before to more and more organizations moving to digital data collection, which is great. That is a positive move. But then if we move up in the last, for us, a heavy focus in the last 10 years has been at this higher level, right? Helping organizations at HQ level and national, regional level make better sense of their data, drive better strategic planning, and setting up the backbone, the results chain backbone that's needed to then be able to design the right tools. And you need both, right? There isn't one tool if you look across the gamut here, other than Excel, and it's not one Excel, right? It's many Excels. There isn't one tool that's really consistently used across all these levels. There isn't one tool that can solve all of the needs across all these levels. And my perhaps contentious view is that there won't be. I don't think there is. I don't think there is a solution for solving all the needs at all the levels for one tool to come fix that for everybody. But I think the opportunity in front of us in the next 5 years is how can we improve these data flows from headquarters to funders and website, NIADI, and all the different folks that might need a flow of our data outside of our organization? And how can we improve the flows within our organization? How can we leverage AI and integration tools to be able to make sure we've got data flowing seamlessly and automatically from the tools we use for data collection to the tools that we need for managing our indicators, our projects, and so on and so forth, because that's the data that ultimately is getting reported back to funders, donors, and other stakeholders. So I think that's kind of the big opportunity and the big question with regard to the IMM infrastructure. So hopefully getting from this fragmented reality that looks like this, or you could say if we look at one organization's context in the current day, looks a bit like this, to a reality that looks a bit more like this, where we could bring data into a central hub and funders and other stakeholders could subscribe to impact data to get a feed of data that's kept up to date from the various tools that we might be using to collect and manage data internally, whether those are, indicator management tools like DHIS2 or AMP or what have you, or whether they're data collection tools like Kobo or Comcare or other sorts of tools like that. And if we had this kind of structure, then we think we could save millions of hours for the sector. Collectively, we could save millions of hours, because if you look on the left side, there's just all this manual work that is needed to get data from one structure to the next structure to the next structure. And yes, like if we used Claude Cowork to sit across all of our files, we could, if we have enough credits, we probably could automate some of that work. But it would be much more efficient if we could bring data into a central hub and into a consistent structure to then facilitate this faster sharing of impact data. So this is the opportunity that we see in the IMM infrastructure space, and this is really the status quo on the left side that we see the challenge that we're faced with. I've seen a lot of chat, so I just want to make sure if anything's coming up that questions are being asked before we move on. Cool.
Most of them are comments, and there is a question at the moment, but it's quite a detailed one. You could probably answer afterwards directly about Salesforce. So there's a discussion going on in the background about open source Salesforce, etc.
Yeah, Salesforce is certainly not open source. It is a very powerful and flexible platform, but it is not open source. You can get 10 free licenses for Salesforce if you want them. It can be quite costly though, and it doesn't do what you need it to do out of the box. So it has to be configured and set up. So yeah, and again, the purpose here is not to advocate for any particular tool. I think the reality is there's a wide range of tools used across the sector. If we can be helpful in thinking through that tech strategy or how what kind of tool might be most appropriate, we're certainly happy to chat with folks about that and kind of unpack the kinds of data that they might be managing and the challenges they might be facing. I also think, and again, this could be contentious, but I think that there's a little bit of a prevailing open source or bust mindset within the nonprofit sector that I think is probably holding the sector back a little bit. And the reality is that open source technology, there's advantages and disadvantages to using open source technology, but open source isn't inherently better than not open source technology. What folks have called out in the chat, in my quick skim of this here, is the importance of affordability in tools and technology. And that's super important. And to be thinking about the long-term total cost of ownership of any tool that's part of your infrastructure is really important. That's going to come down to the setup cost, the license costs, if there are license costs, and then the ongoing running costs, whether those costs are kind of maintenance costs or support costs, or whether those costs are your staff pulling their hair out or leaving the organization because the Excel spreadsheets that you're asking them to manage are unwieldy and impossible to work with, right? So those are kind of the three cost components. We have a good piece on our website called the 10 criteria to evaluate when choosing a technology. We can kind of share a link to that, but that you may find that as a useful resource to take a peek at. All right, I'll keep the chat up just in case there's other comments coming through. So let's pivot a little bit and talk about what's underpinning these infrastructure challenges. So what's wrong with the current infrastructure? I think there's 5 main problems. We've talked about a couple of them, but the first, which is implicit in these conversations, and I think was brought up in the earlier discussion, is that there's no agreed data standard. That's a really hard problem to fix. I don't have the solution to solving that, but there are some data standards out there, but there isn't an agreed upon standard across the board in the sector and I'm not talking about which indicators to use, for example. I'm talking about what is an indicator, what is a result. You go into even one big organization. I was on a call with an organization earlier today, and they, across their thousands of staff, they don't have agreement on what is a project or what is a grant. So even within the organization, they don't have a data standard. The sector certainly doesn't have one. Second is that the IMM infrastructure is really driven by funder-centric strategies. Funders are largely setting the strategy and dictating these are the indicators you need to report. And I think this may be changing a little bit with the momentum behind trust-based philanthropy, but it is an underlying problem in the current infrastructure. The third, which I've talked about enough already, is that we have siloed dead data in these disconnected systems. The fourth is that as a result of that, there's a lot of manual consolidation of data and a lot of time wasted in that consolidation. And the fifth, which is a result of that, is that data quality takes a hit whenever we're doing that manual consolidation. And that produces ultimately a lack of trust in the data. I think many of us, I think the reality is that there's actually a house of cards when it comes to a lot of organizations' impact data. But a lot of folks are unwilling or a little bit afraid to admit that, including funders, to ask those kinds of questions because they know how stretched we all are when it comes to managing when it comes to managing impact data, and they don't want to further burden organizations. We need to get to a reality where data quality is better, where our impact data are more reliable and trustworthy. But we need to somehow do that without spending more time on this, because we're already spending those 150 million hours. So how do we do that? What could a future state look like? So imagine if we had a hub. So I alluded to this before. If you had like a friendly central hub that was API centric, so you could connect it to the different tools that different organizations were using. It could work for nonprofits, it could work for social enterprises, it could work for companies. Basically, any organization that wants to share its impact data with other stakeholders could connect the tools that they use to manage their data with this hub. And again, not an exhaustive set of logos or endorsements necessarily here from this idea, but the idea being that a wide array of of tools could be connected to through their open APIs, could be connected to a hub like this, and then funders could also connect to the hub. They could subscribe to feeds of impact data. And be able to bring that data into tools like Flux or Salesforce or wherever they're doing their grant management. And so the analogy that I like, for those who know me well, know I'm a competitive marathon runner. So I'm pretty obsessed with Strava. And so an analogy is that we need basically like a Strava for impact data. So nobody's going in and manually entering their data into Strava, and they're certainly not copy pasting their data from Garmin into Strava. Strava just grabs the data from my watch, right? I've got a Garmin watch. Someone else has a Coros or an Apple Watch. It grabs the data from the tool that's tracking the transactional data, which in this case is the route that I ran, how fast I ran, how long I ran, and it's bringing that into Strava. And on Strava, you can see what the runner did, or the biker did, or the hiker did, or whatever it is. And they might spice it up with some imagery, some pictures or videos. They might put some additional text on there. The other thing they're doing on Strava is they're curating how they share, what they share, and how they share it, and who they share their data with. And so it's not perfect. It's not a perfect analogy, but it's a good analogy for this kind of hub that we think the sector needs. We've been working on a sort of a draft version of what a hub could look like. So we'll share a couple videos that illustrate what this kind of hub could look like. The tool we've been building is called Common Ground. I don't know of others that are building something very similar yet, but I'm very eager to know if there's others on this call or others of who are building something similar, so that we can align our efforts and make sure that we're collaborating as effectively as we can be. So this is just a quick walkthrough of what a tool like Common Ground might look like. You would have an impact profile. This could be per organization, per project, or per portfolio. You can manage the themes and population serves, the SDGs. You can essentially tag the profile with the relevant themes or tags that would be needed, so that we can understand, who is this working, and it's ultimately searchable. You can spice it up with some high level information. You can build out dashboards that allow you to go explore the indicators on this profile. So organizations can set up however many indicators they would want to manage on here, and then be able to connect, as we'll see in a couple minutes, connect their data sources to the indicators so that they can aggregate the data automatically. And then, if you imagine a funder being able to just view this profile, this is an example of a funder's profile. So funders themselves also need to share their data with their stakeholders. So this allows us to see, hey, who are the organizations or the projects being funded, and what's being achieved by this portfolio for the Global Impact Foundation, this sort of fictitious funder. And then we can see who are the connected, we can see the impact data in a little bit more depth. So we can dashboard this. You could drill into an indicator and explore the data by geography or by gender or other ways that you might want to unpack it, right? So the intent here isn't to solve all business intelligence for everybody, but to provide some basic intelligence. So, and then the ability to ultimately export the data and bring it elsewhere if you need to, or integrate it with other tools, so that you can answer questions easily at your fingertips. And then funders can connect to the organizations that they fund, and that information again could be shared or could be kept private. They can share information around how do they evaluate their impact in their portfolio, the approach that they take. So you can have other kinds of narrative information that you might bring into the profile. You could bring some multimedia into the profile that you want to feature. You could see who are the key people working on this profile, working on this portfolio. And then you can also share, you can also share some files and resources. So if you want to do your impact report or other sources. So then if you drill into one of the organizations in this portfolio, this is what a project profile or an organization and implementers profile might look like. They might be tagged to other themes, other populations. They would have a similar dashboard, but maybe some different indicators, right? Maybe some of the indicators are going to overlap with the funder, but some are going to be different. Where we have the overlap, the funders could just roll up data from the organizations that they're funding and have the picture of their impact at the fund level. Organizations could build out, a theory of change or log frames on here to be able to lay out here the outcomes we're working towards. Here's the indicators we're using to track that. These are the sort of building blocks that would help organizations communicate the impact that they're pursuing and the impact that they're having. And then on the back end of this, you could basically just manage all of that. You could manage all of that data. You could adjust what's on the profile. You could, toggle through and add the different pieces, maybe share more stories, add other narrative information, add some indicators, connect the indicators to your data sources, and so on and so forth. Let's see if I can kind of skip. Well, I skipped ahead too much. There we go. Sorry. We go back to this. So yeah, you can manage indicators on here. So different types of indicators could be managed on the platform. You could track your result data on here. You could bring stories to get the more qualitative side of impact on. You could connect to other organizations, and then you could ultimately connect your data sources. And I know we're tight on time. We also have a little demo that shows how could you do like mapping from your data source to a platform like this. But that gives you a little taste of. Sorry, I'll keep this full screen. That gives you a little taste of what we think a tool like this could look like. Lost my full screen here. Sorry about that. So let me just see in the chat. I know there's a bunch of questions coming up. Interesting. Cool. Great. Supply versus demand driven. Yeah, I love that. Right. So I'll just keep this demo going kind of while I speak to some of these things. But yeah, the idea is that a tool like this could reshape the conversations that implementers have with funders. Right. Implementers can be able to show, hey, this is what we're already tracking. Right. So it becomes more of a negotiation. What we're gonna additionally track if you're asking us to track some new data. So this shows how you could connect Kobo as a data source here, to be able to then visualize, okay, here's what some of the Kobo data looks like, the structure of that data, and then be able to ultimately, the process of normalizing this looks like figuring out, okay, what are the results? Like what are the data that we might want to count or sum or average or what have you? How do we know what period to put this in or what time it is in? How do we know the geography of it? Do we need to deduplicate this in some way, right? So is there a unique ID? Do we need to disaggregate the data in some way, right? So maybe we want to disaggregate it by gender or age or other, any other way that the organization might need to. You can name your data source and then save that. And then you're ultimately then mapping your, skip ahead a little bit. So you can, for an indicator, so number of farmers trained, we could then set up the data source to feed into this. And for us, like the inspiration for this has come from AMP Impact. We built this functionality into AMP Impact, but that relies on data that already is on Salesforce or connects to Salesforce. The idea with Common Ground with this hub is that you could connect tools from many different sources, from different tools without needing to bring that data into this platform. You can aggregate the data from that platform into this indicator result structure that is frankly it's not an established data standard, but it is consistent and agreed upon largely across the sector from what we've seen over the last 16 years of doing this. And it's not confidential. We're not sharing sensitive information here. It's aggregate data, but it is somewhat granular. We're able to break the data down by sex or by rural, urban, or disability status, or whatever other disaggregations might be needed. And then funders, other stakeholders could get a feed of that, get some visualization, as we saw in the last little demo of what that might look like. And then, as Acitus will show in a second, we can also make that AI enabled. We can take that a little bit further with AI. So you could set this to refresh on a weekly basis or monthly basis or whatnot, right? So, and this is just to show then you could kind of refresh your results to be able to see, okay, boom, the number of farmers trained. Do we want to overwrite the data that's in there or add it to the data that's there? We're going to add it to, and then it's going to update the results to the latest value. And so this is a way we can kind of keep it in sync, but we can also keep control of what people are seeing on the profile. So that's kind of a quick view of ingestion. I'll set this to play and let Acitus speak to how AI could come into this as well.
Okay, thanks, Zach. I'll try to rush through here. So this is a prototype of our impact data chat, and I just want to make a couple of key points here. We can connect to multiple data sources, and those sources are semi-structured and anonymized, and they can be on your own or on our infrastructure.
Sorry.
That's the current design. Sorry. So what I think one of the key points, I know we're very, very tight on time, but the key point I want to make here is that context, as Damien pointed out, is everything when you're dealing with a large language model or with an AI chatbot. And this is not really a chatbot. Each one of these data sources is a separate sub-agent that only knows about that data. So it's limited context, and it's harnessed to understand that data when you import it. So the idea is that you have an orchestrator that kind of figures out what data source you're looking at and then passes that out. So the queries you're making, they're all harnessed in the actual request you would make to the data source, and you define that and you limit it to that. So it can't do anything else. So you can get more deterministic, if not completely deterministic results, based on the design. So the hope for this tool is to kind of unlock all that data, but to get really grounded. And this is where the human element comes in, because you would go in and design and define, with some help from AI. There's a wizard in there to help you structure how this data might be presented and limit the interactions to that. So another important thing is kind of the ability to interrogate these data sources in parallel. So if you ask a question to two data sources at once, which there's a brief little show here in a second. So I think just rushing through here, but you can create these kind of these insights looking at multiple data sources, and the orchestrator will go out to each of the data sources and its understanding of the data sources, retrieve the data, and then synthesize them into some result that you determine ahead of time. So I think that's kind of what we're trying to build in these kind of workflows to save time and gaining data insights, but still keep it on rails to make sure you are getting results. I mean, if you take the same data and pull it into ChatGPT or even Claude, and you don't really give it this context, probably going to make a lot of stuff up. So this kind of prevents that from happening and keeps the cost low by keeping the context very small and focused on the data you're looking at. Okay. I think I got
Awesome.
5 minutes.
Yeah, I want to make sure we have space just if others have questions, reactions, inputs. I mean, I saw great commentary from from Amal and others, Miranda in the chat as well. Like, you guys are absolutely right? I mean, there's huge questions here around the power dynamics in the sector. That's another big problem. I mentioned that in kind of the 5 big problems that we're wrestling with in the infrastructure space. Affordability is something we're very much thinking about. We think a tool, in order to really solve this problem, a tool like this needs to have a freemium model. Again, Strava being a good analogy there, but that it's a tool that funders would pay for to be able to then easily aggregate and ingest their data to be able to have a real-time picture of what's going on in their portfolio. Whereas implementers, especially smaller implementers, would not bear a cost of this beyond the time required to kind of set up those indicators, set up the flows so that their data can flow through and get to the people that need it. So this isn't a platform isn't going to, I think a lot of like tech entrepreneurs will come and sort of try to sell like a tool as being the solution to all of our problems, and it just isn't the case. Solving the infrastructure challenges that we're facing is going to require a movement. That movement has to have funders at the table, and so the number one thing I'm putting energy into next week in Oxford at the Skull World Forum is getting as many funders on board with this, with piloting this tool with their portfolios as we can. This is something, similar to what the approach that Damien and others are taking. The opportunity here and the opportunity for how AI can reshape how we work is enormous, but we need to be careful and really thoughtful about how we move forward. And so for us, that looks like piloting this before it just launches, and we really need thought partners. We need help from folks. So if folks are interested in getting involved or helping shape what this platform is, or just help steer us in a different direction, because if we've got the wrong ideas here, we want to hear that too. You can check out sharecommonground.org, and we've got a little form on there you can fill out if you're interested in being like either an early adopter or a beta tester of Common Ground, or if you just want to get in touch with us to give us some advice or ask some questions. We love that. And you can check us out at verasolutions.org if there's other ways we can be helpful for you. And I know we're at time, so I'll stop there.
Yeah. Thank you, Zach and Acides. That's really great. There is one question. You've gone through the webinar chat and you've answered that. I think there's quite a few questions in the Q&A. One stands out to me, which I think would be really good to answer, is how are you planning to convince donors to use this centralized hub, Common Ground, when each one has its own interest indicators, projects, theory of change, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes. Yeah, great. So, and also, so there's also an important question here. This is not based on Salesforce. It can connect to Salesforce. It's not based on Salesforce. So we are working on this. We've got a handful of funders already on board with piloting this and energized about its potential for strengthening the work that they do. The value proposition of a platform like this is different for funders than it is for implementers. The pitch, if you will, to funders is you could have visibility of impact data in your portfolio from last week or last month, as opposed to 6 months ago, and you can see the data trail here. So you can see that this data came from Kobo, Comcare, Ona, Magpie. Where did it come from, and how was it set up? That gives you more trust and more confidence in the impact data that's coming through. Now, as far as the flexibility side of it is, there's two pieces to this. So one is a hub like this, a tool like Common Ground needs to be pretty turnkey. Folks alluded to this needing to get this working in the global South or make it work for a wide range of organizations. It's got to be really simple. It's got to be able to translate into all these different languages. It needs to be. It isn't configure it differently for every organization, but so it needs to have a consistent structure, data structure. It needs to have one data structure behind it for indicators and results in order for it to work. And we believe we believe the data structure that's there reflects what we've seen over the last 16 years. But it doesn't promote or push certain indicators or a certain theory of change or objectives. It isn't saying, hey, here's the library that everybody should be using, or here's how everybody should think about their theory of change. There's the full flexibility to be able to structure, to set up the indicators you want to set up the framework the outcomes, objectives that you want to set up. There'd be full flexibility to set up the narratives and more qualitative side of things. So that's really, again, based on we're coming at this from having been working in this space with many funders, with many implementers as well. And just to be honest, like the background to this is we saw cases where funders are using AMP Impact and implementers implementers that they fund were using AMP Impact. And it's mind blowing that you would have to manually take data from one tool, export it, and then manually input it into the same tool, but it's a different instance, so they just can't connect to each other. And as we got out a few years ago, starting to design what would AMP to AMP sharing or AMP to AMP publishing look like, we realized that's not what the sector needs. What the sector needs is AMP to hub, hub to AMP, everything else to hub, hub to everything else. Yeah, AMP Impact is the tool. Yeah, that's fair. Not everybody loves every tool. But again, one tool isn't going to be the answer, but a hub like this that's API centric, that can make it, and AI enabled, we think could be a big part of the solution to the infrastructure challenges that we've got in the IMM space right now.
Great. Well, thank you, Acides, and thank you, Zach. Good to see you again, and good to hear where you've come a long time ago from all those days in grassroots soccer and pens and papers and surveys. So those infrastructure questions matter everywhere, but they matter differently once the context gets harder. That is where we will turn to next. But before then, we'll have a comfort break. So we'll see you back in 9 minutes and 37 seconds. So we're 10-minute break. Thanks. Back at 4:30 or in 10 minutes. Hello, everyone. I hope you've had a good break. Welcome back. Hope you're all sitting comfortably because we're going to start again. So this next session is a reality check. It helps us see why context is not a side issue. In fragile, constrained, or high-risk settings, the practical judgment around AI becomes more demanding, not less. I'm very pleased to introduce Ali Khatib, a senior MEL and knowledge management specialist with extensive experience across humanitarian and development settings in the Middle East and North Africa region. Ali brings practical judgment about what responsible use looks like when contexts are fragile, high stakes, or operationally constrained. Salam, good to see you. Ali's going to actually chat with Yasmin today, so I'm going to pass over to Yasmin, who's going to start the session off. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. So welcome everyone. My name's Yasmin. I am part of the Summit team here at the Impact Intel Lab. So very excited to be moderating this session today. And yeah, really excited that Ali, you're joining us to share sort of your very practical experience of using AI to enable your work as a MEL expert in fragile contexts. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yasmin. I'm glad to be with you today, and I hope I will share something useful for everybody. Thank you.
Great. And when you're ready, Ali, you can share your screen as well, as we've got some images to show as we have this conversation as well. Great. So let's start off with the very important question around context. So that we're all on the same page here today, most of you might know, but maybe you don't. But when we talk about fragile contexts, Ali, could you tell us kind of what sort of environments or conditions are we talking about here? And with this notion of AI, why does that change the AI conversation?
Yeah, actually, I think this is the one of the great questions we can start with, because I think we need to tell everybody here what do we mean by fragile context. Especially there is no universal definition about fragile context. So what I will say here, it depends on some literature and according to some practitioners who are working in this field. Usually, when we talk about fragile context, this is really direct to something like natural disaster, political unrest, or military conflict. However, this is not the whole story. When we say fragile context, that means when the local system are no longer capable to cope the consequences of the disasters, and also when the local systems do not have the ability to meet the basic needs of people, and most importantly, when lives are at risk. So this is basically the definition of the fragile context in short. What does that mean in our work as evaluator? That means there are certain circumstances we need to take into consideration, and there are some measures that we need also to take in order to evaluate and in order to monitor the situation there. For example, when it comes to data could be unreliable, the sources could be unreliable, the data could be incompleted, and also the data itself most probably will be much sensitive or more than sensitive than the data that we receive usually from usual context. If we look at this context around us here, let me talk about the environment I'm having here. I'm based in MENA region, and there are several examples of conflict context. And I had the chance to work in some of these contexts. For example, we have Libya, we have Syria. In Palestine, we have West Bank and Gaza. Also, we have Yemen. So these contexts actually considered as fragile context. also why we consider it as a fragile context, because there is limited physical access for donors and for international implementing partners to be there. So instead, they hire or they contract local partners and local entities to work on behalf of them there. So this is basically the idea of the fragile context. Now, the second part of your question, how this could be different when it comes to AI. When we use AI, usually AI is a platform that we can share information. However, when it comes to conflict or when it comes to fragile context, we need to be extra cautious when we share this information, because AI usually is for us as a black box or like something that works behind the scene. We upload information, but we don't know where this information goes, and we don't know exactly who access this information. This is why we need to be extra cautious. We need to take some measures to make sure that this data is safe and this data is not accessible by everybody.
Great, thank you so much. So yeah, what you're saying is that many things there, but that in these contexts, the reliability then of data can be more limited due to these fragile settings.
Right.
Also that there are lots of different factors that are playing into the challenges of evaluating in such settings. You mentioned political sensitivities, also limited presence of actually evaluators being there on the ground, and then overall kind of higher stakes in these environments as well. So thank you for that first answer. So now moving a little bit more to sort of practical implications. So when AI enabled impact work moves from sort of a relatively stable setting into a more fragile or constrained one, could you tell me a little bit, or tell us all a little bit about what changes first in practice?
Yeah, sure. So to answer this question, maybe again to start with something just to as an introduction, let's say. So let me talk about how do we use as evaluators, how do we use and utilize AI in normal context, and then we can compare this with using it when we have fragile context. As evaluators, we have let's say if we are talking about evaluation, there is a process for the evaluation. And personally, I use AI heavily in my work, and in every single evaluation I do, I use AI. But I should underline something here, really important, which is when I say using AI, that means I use it wisely, responsibly, and safely. So going back to the evaluation process usually starts with drafting scope of work. That includes drafting the evaluation questions, and then drafting the inception report, developing the tools, then followed by data collection, data analysis, data reporting, dissemination, and finally learning. And in each part of these evaluation process or stage, there are some tools, AI-based tools, I usually use and definitely also evaluators use to facilitate the work. So, for instance, when it comes to literature review, or when it comes to drafting inception report, there are tools called, for instance, Elicit, where it is a powerful tool that you can get information only from published documents or published paper or research, rather than getting things from internet. When it comes to data collection, for instance, there is something we use, we will talk about this later, but it is something convert voice into text. When it comes to data analysis, we use tools called Power Drill or Data Robot. These are AI-based tools we usually use. By the way, I conducted a webinar recently sponsored by IOSCE, and I think I can share this as a resource maybe after the conference, Yasmin.
That would be great. Yeah. I think all of the tools that you've mentioned, Ali, so far, you mentioned that you have different tools at each step of an evaluation or an evaluation cycle. So if you could share those later in the community and the resource space, that would be brilliant. I'm sure everyone will be interested. Yeah.
Yeah, good. So the idea is that we, as evaluator, we use AI very heavily. And personally, I call my AI guy with ChatGPT or any chatbot Awad, which is like a nickname. And in case I need any answer, any question or something, I say, hey, Awad, just let me know what blah, 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 blah. Anyways, so this is exactly the evaluation process and how AI is utilized within these process. Now, when it comes to fragile context, we usually deal with sensitive information. What does that mean? The nature of the interventions are being implemented under fragile context is different than the ones that are being implemented in normal context. For example, in fragile context, we work with SGBV, sexual and gender
based violence.
Based violence, exactly. So when we have this kind of information, it's very sensitive, and this kind of interventions are being implemented more under conflict areas or under fragile context. So we need to be careful about this information to be shared into AI. Also, when it comes to fragile context, there is a kind of trade-off between resources, time, and the quality of the data, because we don't expect to get high data with high quality because there is no time and resources are limited. So there is a kind of trade-off between these three factors. Also, when it comes to AI as well, we need to introduce AI with the context that we are dealing with, especially these contexts usually are unique, and when we ask any question if we need any deliverables to be provided by AI will use standard information and use something usually available in the internet. However, in the context that we are talking about, it is a unique. So we need to tell AI about the context through providing narrative to the AI, through uploading very recent reports to AI, just to familiarize AI about the context that we are living in.
Excellent, thank you. And I think, that's an important takeaway there in fragile context, that there's always that trade-off between quality, time, and cost there, and that also plays into the use of AI as well. So let's move on a little bit. So I was also wondering, speaking to evaluators and sort of people across the impact space, from our lab perspective over the last period, there is still maybe not everyone agree, but there's still kind of a simplistic framing about AI as either something that people think is clearly very helpful or something that's clearly sort of unhelpful or maybe dangerous and unethical. So could you speak a little bit, Ali, to sort of why that might be too simplistic in fragile contexts, and maybe give us an example as well of your work? That would be great.
Yeah, sure. So when we use AI in fragile context, we use it. Nobody can say that we cannot use it. And on the other hand, we cannot use it widely without restrictions. So it is not a white and black approach, or it's not a binary thing using AI within the fragile context. So some areas we can use AI and some areas we cannot. For example, when it comes to data collection and converting voice to text. When we conduct KIIs or focus group discussion, it's safe. We can use this because it is something that is not uploaded into AI. It's something that's stored in our phones. Nowadays, especially the new phones, has an embedded feature that converts voice into text. So in this case, I can use this tool, even if there is something confidential were discussed during these interviews or during these focus group discussions, okay? But when it comes to upload reports, or if I would like to do data analysis, so in this case, I have to upload these information into AI. Usually, data includes names, ID numbers, and a lot of information that related to the beneficiaries maybe, and also related to the employees and who are working there. So uploading this information could be dangerous and could be accessible by somebody we don't want that person to access. So if you like me to give an example, there is a clear example actually I've experienced. So one of the countries I worked in, there was a conflict, and it was like a very bad conflict. And one of the conflict party requested the international implementing partners and donors to share the names of the local employees to get registered. So, this is something against the international law and against all the ethics. So usually the international organization refused that request. So on the other hand, when I received reports from that context, I received stories, I received narratives, and inside the narratives, there are the names of the employees who did the data collection, and also the partners we were working with in that context. So in this case, I was like in the middle. Should I use AI or not? Using AI by having this kind of information without any measures, definitely it is not appropriate. So what I did, I removed all the information from the reports, from the text that lead to identify the persons. And when it comes also for data sets and Excel sheets, I removed the names, the IDs, and all the related information and replaced them with auto-generated code. And then I upload information on AI applications for analysis. So that was an example of how can we go in the gray area. So it's not a black we say no, we will not use AI, and it was not white area where we can upload everything we have and ask AI to generate products. Also, as you know, many people also use AI to translate documents. Also, this is really important. If there is something really confidential, when for example, I receive stories about gender violence, so it is not recommended to upload this information and stories into AI for translation, for instance. No, I will prefer to translate it by myself rather uploading this information into AI. Similarly, when we draft an email, for instance, talking about a case, so I don't use AI in this case. So actually, this is the sensitivity of fragile context, and this is how we deal with AI. It's not something widely, and it's not using it at all. It's something in the middle.
Great, and I think you have to just sounds like take the different things case by case to decide whether or not to use AI, but with serious sort of considerations about what the consequences might be with its use, and making sure that when you do use it, then you have those practical steps in place to sort of try and mitigate those consequences. So, for example, by anonymizing the data, as you explained, Ali. So that's great. And so the next part sort of our discussion I wanted to cover is, if someone wants to use AI responsibly in one of these sort of more difficult environments, what are the practical questions they should be asking themselves before doing anything, before starting to use AI?
Yeah, this is a very good question, to be honest. And there are a lot of things that we need to think about before using AI, especially when we are talking about fragile context. First, we need to know exactly what are the policies and guidelines and protocols that our institutions or our organizations follow for AI usage or for using AI. This is really important. We need to know that. I know there are several organizations now are working on this, but they are still at the beginning of this. But there are some movement toward this issue, and also not only on the institutional level, but also on the national level and international level. We need to stick with these guidelines when we use AIs. When we use AI. This is really important. And if you allow me, I can maybe here advocate for this kind of thing, because this conference or this summit includes evaluators, and maybe we can advocate toward having protocols or guidelines to use AI properly, and also, and most importantly, during the fragile context. So maybe this can be done very soon. Also, the second thing that we need also to look at when we use AI, or when we decide to use AI, to know exactly how much confidential information it is, or how much sensitive information it is, before using AI. As I said before, maybe we need to do some of manipulation or adjusting some of the information inside before using AI. Again, for AI, which is in line with what has been said yesterday in this summit about verification. Verification. This is why I repeated 3 times, because it is really important. Using AI without verifying the results or without verifying the output, this is a big mistake, because there is no 100% guarantee that AI provides you with accurate information. You as a user, or you as an evaluator, it is your responsibility to verify the information. Not only that, also to verify the sources used by AI when it generated the output to you. This is something I got from my practical experience, which is try to divide the assignment to AI into smaller tasks. So rather than asking AI a big chunk of thing, try to slice it and try to ask AI to do task by task. For example, when I work on an evaluation report, the first thing I usually discuss with chatbot is to agree on the layout of the report, and then work section by section. After we finish that section, which is done, we move to another section. This is one of the things I noticed during my practical experience with using AI. Also, using AI, which is really important, AI or chatbots in general, because we have a lot of chatbots currently. We have ChatGPT, we have which is USAID product, US product, sorry, DeepSeek, which is a Chinese product, and also recently we have LeChat, which is a French product, and Gemini and Claude. So we have so many chatbots, and each chatbot represents, if I can say that, the opinion or the thoughts of the country that developed that application. So for instance, if we have a sensitive question, you can try that by yourself, by the way. If you have a sensitive question related to religion, related to politics, or related to culture, if you ask the same question to different chatbots, you will get different answers. And the differences are not something tiny. No, it's something could be huge. So try that by yourself and you will see the differences. So the bottom line here is when you use AI for sensitive information or for something debatable, try to use different sources. And also try to, if you have your own resources and you would like AI to support you in analyzing the reports or the documents, you can narrowing down the search by providing AI with the resources you have, and ask AI just only to look at these resources rather than looking at everything.
Great, thank you, Ali. And just to summarize, I think this point is really interesting, and this matters because generative AI systems are, of course, trained by different training data, different governance contexts, and then they can, of course, reproduce different political and cultural framings of the same issue. So although AI can help generate interpretations, we shouldn't, as evaluators, just allow it to choose the perspective or the framing of the evaluation, which I think is a great point. We've got just 5 minutes left until the panelists are going to start. So I want to just get one more question in, and then we will let them begin. So are there uses of AI that can also be genuinely helpful across various contexts that you wanted to talk about as well, if AI is handled carefully?
Yeah, actually, there are some, mainly when we talk about data analysis, let's say, there are tools that can be used in all contexts. For example, for a qualitative analysis, we have NVivo and we have Max QDA. And these two applications nowadays, they have AI-based components inside the application where you can use AI. And also when it comes to data visualization, Canva, for instance, also Canva supports AI. And they are very safe because you are dealing with a closed system, and data is not going to be shared widely or publicly. When it comes to quantitative data, we have SPSS and other applications also supports AI. So I think there are many applications now, if we can say that, closed application, we can use safely in all contexts.
Thank you so much. And if you had to leave everybody today with just one closing principle, what would that be?
Actually, yeah, there is something. When I use AI, I usually think of having a pet, especially a powerful dog, let's say. So in-house, we have our pets inside our house for having fun with them and for our pleasure. And when we go outside, we need to take some measures to make the situation safe. For instance, for dogs, we need to leash dogs when we go and when hang out outside, just to make it safe. This is why we need to take extra measures. Also, pets and dogs in general usually try to be friendly with their owners. So the way that I deal with them, it will be like a protocol, and both the pets and the owners will be like thinking the same thing. Similarly, when we reflect this situation into or on using AI, when we use AI, if we use it for our personal information, it's up to you. You can use it. You can share information, whatever information you have. It's up to you. It's up to user. But when it comes to data related to beneficiaries, related to somebody else, we need to take extra measures, as we mentioned before. Also, there is something really important. If I can say that, there is something. We have fingerprint, we have face recognition, we have voice print. So maybe nowadays we can talk about AI print. Why? Because AI and chatbots in general that I'm using currently under my account is thinking in the same way that I do, because it's a learning machine. It learns from myself. So if you would like to test this, ask your ChatGPT, for instance, or any chatbot under your account a question, and try to ask the same question to another by using another account for another person. You will get two different answers, because usually AI, if I call this, try to be friendly with you and try to give you the thing that you like to hear or like to get.
Great, thank you so much. And there's a lot of love for that analogy, Ali. So thank you for that. And looking forward to adding your tools into the community. And yeah, I think what we can all take from this is that context is not a side note to AI use, especially in these fragile settings. And the harder the context, really, the more we need sort of judgment and human accountability. So thank you so much for sharing your insights with us all. And I think we'll move straight on to the panel now, which Graham can introduce. And Ali, if you could kindly, there's some questions there in the Q&A. So if you could just write the answers to that directly, that would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yasmin, and thank you, Ali. Shukran.
Thank you.
We now bring those questions into the flagship panel, where a range of perspectives will help us hold the field's biggest unresolved issues in productive tension. So I'm now going to pass the floor on to Damien, who is going to introduce the panel one by one and get us started.
Great. So thank you, Ali. That was a really interesting, you're clearly using AI a lot in your work. And, in a real life, challenging, experimental way and conversation that you're constantly having. And it really exemplified the kind of use case that we want to kind of pool those experiences in and share them. So thank you so much for that. But this session, we're now going to move on to the big unanswered questions. And I'm delighted to invite back David from yesterday's session. David is the president and CEO of Fetterman and Associates. He was the founder of Empowerment Evaluation, former director of evaluation at Stanford University School of Medicine. And David really brings a sort of deep evaluation leadership perspective and a human-centered perspective. I'm delighted also to invite Dan back from yesterday as well, who's just joined us from the Center of Acceleration and Social Technology, a charity dedicated to increasing the agency, presence, and influence of social impact organization in the technologies that shape society today. And Dan will really bring, as he did yesterday, this sort of mission-led and civil society lens to this conversation. And we also have Khalil Bittar, who's the evaluation and learning lead at the World Economic Forum and also president of the IOCE. So his evaluation and performance management has spread over 15 years of experience within humanitarian development and multilateral contexts. And he's designed systems across the world. So he's also bringing a deep international evaluation perspective and an equity lens to this piece of work. And lastly, our fourth member is Elizabeth Germana, who brings practical multi-country MEL and implementation experience as well, as do all of our other panelists. She is a MEL expert, over 20 years of experience designing systems across Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East. And she's worked extensively for FCDO, the World Bank, Global Affairs Canada. So we've got a wealth of experience on our panel today. And as the name suggests, it's about the biggest unresolved questions that really sit underneath the sort of practical excitement as well as anxiety that we've jointly experienced around AI-enabled impact practice. And some people in the room are here because they want to move faster, as we've seen in some of the discussions. Some will be here because they want to avoid harm. Most are probably carrying both of those impulses in one go. So our aim here is not to collapse into hype or fear, but to think clearly about what still needs judgment, what still needs proof, and what responsible practice should look like as this particular field evolves. So without further ado, I'm going to put my first question to David. As AI becomes more capable, where does the human role now sit in evaluation and impact work, and what must remain human-led?
Good question. Let me start with Geoffrey Hinton, Nobel laureate's comments on this topic to set a reasonable standard for our conversation today. He said the human brain, is just a machine. He says it's a wonderfully complex machine, does incredible things that are very important, but it's just a machine. And his feeling is that in principle, there's no reason to think that the human brain is the pinnacle of intelligence, as he phrased it. And I think it might be quite soon that these machines are smarter than us. I still hope that we can reach an agreement with the machines that they are benevolent parents and be looking after us. Well, that sets the tone, I think, for where do we belong? Where do we fit? Well, at the moment, we're in good shape because it's at the embryonic stage, the very early stages of development. So there's a lot of work. Khalil has highlighted the need for verification. Dan's talking about the social value, of course. Elizabeth's talking about the practical implications. So I think we all have something to offer for some time, maybe 2 to 5 years. No, might be longer, might be slightly longer. I think the point, however, is that if this is the case, if Geoffrey is actually correct, and I think he is, then we have a moral compulsion to make sure that there isn't a misalignment between AI and our social values. So that we need to be in there, basically, and the communities we work with, and the communities that we are now helping teach them how to evaluate their own programs, not just us as evaluators, but to be in there, need to be in the beginning of even the prototypes, the beginning part of developing an evaluation plan or an AI tool. So my feeling is that we have a very important role to play, quite frankly, for our own personal survival, never mind our survival as evaluators and keeping evaluation focused and hopefully still useful. So I think that the ultimate value is us to be in the game and communities in the game to help shape where this is going. So the AI is working in a way that's aligned with our social values to aim where we want to go. And as Hinton highlights, that it's not, and not that I'm against money, but it's not just geared towards profits. Because if it's going to aim towards profits, you can already see what's going on in social media where they hype up our differences all the time because it gets more advertising, more clicks. Well, that's not the way things should be motivated. That's why we need to talk about maybe today a little bit regulations and that sort of thing over profits. So that's my key point, is that I think that we have an important social value role to play, never mind the methodological components, to make sure AI is in shape as well as the governmental one. So that's my 2 cents on the higher level part of our own personal survival. So if we don't even care about being humanitarian and helping other communities that need it, at least think about yourself in the larger scheme of things. If you want AI and us to be compatible, then we should be driving it in a socially responsible fashion.
And in a practical way, what would that look like? How would we exert that sort of influence on this developmental stage at this such pivotal moment?
A quick example, and turning it upside down. As I mentioned earlier, when I was in India we're working with using empowerment evaluation to reduce or eliminate tuberculosis, that's where I learned it's not always a matter of how to use AI to improve evaluation, but we use evaluation to understand and improve AI products. In that case, you'd have folks that you're targeting, people that have potentially tuberculosis in the street, and you have them involved in prototyping the AI tools. So the same thing applies to our evaluation work. We need to have folks that are in the community that basically are the folks that are the target, that are the focus of hopefully benefiting from the evaluation in from the beginning at every stage. It could be in a collaborative way, it could be in a participatory way, it could be in an empowerment way where they're actually in charge and we're the coaches and facilitators. You can choose which dimension, but there's no question that the future is going to be greater involvement, a greater immersion of the community members so that we are shaping it in the responsible fashion that will help them, not just aimed at, for example, profits without them in mind. So in a practical sense, I think we need to be much more participatory, much more integrated. And I believe in bringing everyone in, by the way, not just community members, but the donors or designees as well, so that we're all working together and no one pulls the rug out from under us in the middle. So to me, it's going to have to be a much more sort of holistic process. It cannot be done in the way we've done in the past, where we've all been educated incorrectly. We think the donors should put the money in and then leave. That's nonsense. They have the best view of all the different kinds of projects they're investing in. We think the community, they feel, oh, great, we like empowerment, we like participatory, but we're going to walk away because we have to hurry and get this schedule done, this budget done, whatever it is. No, we're going to continue doing it together. And then finally, we're miseducated as evaluators, think that we have all the knowledge and the insight when we have a great deal of knowledge, but we need to respect what's going on in the community to help drive it. So in a practical way, in a nutshell, aside from all the methodological issues that we're all going to be raising and the issues of validation and everything else, my feeling is that we have to have the community much more in charge, much more the center of this, if we want to keep ourselves aligned with our social values. Otherwise, it'll become elusive and elitist.
Fantastic. So it sounds like, that sort of lesson of needing that participatory approach, which has been a sort of a hard fought lesson learned, hasn't it? I mean, you've led that with the empowerment evaluation piece, but it's, shining a greater light even on the requirement for that approach in a world that's got AI in it. It's needed even more than it was in the past.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's really reaffirmed my belief in people and the need for all of us to be involved and to respect our different knowledge base, whether it's in the community or whether it's in our sphere in the evaluation world, wherever we are, that we all have something to contribute that's necessary, not just nice, to make this all work.
Fantastic. I'm going to hand to Khalil here in terms of, what becomes more dangerous when people trust AI too quickly, jumping into it without, a second thought. And especially, again, in those sort of unequal contexts and sort of low resource contexts, where, that sort of equity lens is so important.
Thanks, Damien. And I'd like to highlight the 3 points I think here that are relevant to this question, excellent question of yours. One is that really the real risk isn't error, right? Like David mentioned, we're human being as well. We are, if you think of us as living system, but also have a machine aspect, and we make mistakes. So mistakes are good when you learn from them. But the problem with AI, when it's so confident, but also unchallenged, errors. And this is one aspect. And put on top of that actually it is doing learning. It is a learning system. So it's feeding and learning from these errors, if unchallenged by human. So in this early stage, as David mentioned, actually the human role is central and is very important. Maybe at some point of time that this will not be the case. But I think for many of our colleagues here and the professionals here, we are talking about the here and now, and it's really important. So AI outputs are very fluent, very structured, highly convincing. And this sometimes unintentionally would weaken our ability even or appetite to question the evidence there. So I have been using AI since the start. I think I never got I don't know or I'm not sure. It always knows everything. It's like this arrogant friend or colleague you might have that knows it all, speaks with confidence and eloquence, but unfortunately not always right. Are you going to be a critical friend and question and ask, or are you going to take it? So we say usually with humans, trust but verify. For AI, I would say don't trust and verify. That's essential. So especially that different studies have shown us that actually the range is 30 to 40% hallucination now in AI systems that we have. Of course, it's different from one to another. It's improving so quickly. I completely agree with David that in a few years this will be different because the learning is so quick. But yeah, there's a level of, still a human role that is very important. And especially think about the evaluation field. We have some studies, for IUCE and others. And I think overall, people who call themselves evaluators or working in monitoring and evaluation, they're like 100,000 people around the world. So AI is learning from us now. So whatever we're feeding it, it's also shaping future generation. So that's one take. The other, there are examples. I'm sure there are so many colleagues here, they have examples. AI gave me this elaborate reports when I was asking for a question about certain evaluation, and they don't exist in reality at all. And these reports, I believe them. I went to the internet and checked. It is really this UN agency, and it was done, and it has the name of evaluators, but they're not there. They don't exist. So that was one case. Or we have been working in our work on a database for over 100 projects automated with AI from our closure reports and using Airtable, really nice, really sophisticated. But then some of the lessons learned, they come out of nowhere because it's also learning from other environments, not necessarily with the sources that you give it. Just try with ChatGPT and tell it not to use Dash. It will keep using it forever. I don't know why it's obsessed with it. This is just an example. So just final point on this is that we have, I think, should be working with something we could call AI maturity. When to use AI and when not to use AI. There are places and time. Ali has eloquently highlighted where areas we use AI, and sometimes we should not use AI. We should know when to use. Where are our boundaries? Of course, when we have institutions and organizations that highlight this makes it very good. And all of what I said, I think, applies to fragility. And I'm not going to say much about. Ali has highlighted very good examples, but also low resources context, where really verification capacity becomes limited. The human resources are limited, governance structures, even the issue that our colleagues highlighted, the sophisticated tools that we often discuss there, they cannot access it because there's no resources. So in these places, especially with the whole power issue about, that most affected people by these products are not at all part of its structuring, and David alluded to this, and also Ali mentioned something about how different AI systems are using different resources and language. So power structure is very, very important. I don't know how much, to be honest with you, we can influence this. I am a very positive person. I always tend to say, but now I'm growing up a little bit and feel I'm becoming more pessimistic. But hopefully we can as a community, as you mentioned, David, that we can really contribute to this. It's really, really important. So in a nutshell, the principle for me that we have to work on, and this is not an idea from me, but we already have it in the literature, this co-intelligence. I'm afraid that the intelligence of AI would increase and our intelligence would decrease with time, with dependency. But how to work together? AI is there. It will be with us for a long time. How can we work with AI as partners and, as a community and individual and take it forward? This will make the difference. If we depend on it, if we give it everything and say, you lead, then it will. And I don't know where it will take us. Thank you.
So it sounds like there is this window of opportunity right now, a dwindling window of opportunity, it sounds like, of almost influencing. But, just to challenge and put back, well, how do we actually influence that? I know we can, because if there is this window, it kind of shines a level of importance on us doing something a little bit more proactively around this. It's one of the driving forces around bringing people together for this summit and start having this conversation and engaging in these difficult discussions that are challenging emotionally. We don't want to be replaced by a robot, thanks very much. And it's not cleverer than me, thank you. All of these emotions kind of come, right to the forefront. But what do we do about this in a practical way? We've got this community together. How do we move forward from here? Have we got any ideas?
I was going to say something similar to what you mentioned first. Like, this summit is a great opportunity because it's not bringing people from traditional, area, only one area of monitoring and evaluation or IMM, bringing people working with technology, people working with the field, people working in fragility. That's important. But I take this also to a bigger level as well, because sometimes in the evaluation field we have been working as if we are in a silo. We are very different. Evaluation, actually, evaluation itself, it's a if we want to use it from literature, it should be a transdiscipline, where it's actually useful for other discipline. With psychology, we have something in common with IT, with math, with philosophy. So what our role would be to really a little bit let our guard, try to build more bridges than walls, and speak to people who are in the innovation frontier of these aspects. And I really believe so much in this sense of community, of really talking to other sectors. And right now, it's a good opportunity, for example, in our own organizations. A lot of our organizations are working on AI policies. How we're shaping that, how we are helping them formulating it, evaluating it, doing monitoring and evaluation for it, and measuring the impact for that. That's really important. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, and evaluation organizations, individuals, associations can play an important role.
Fantastic. Dan.
Thank you. When we look at the history of technology and its impact on society, what we really look at is not just the technology itself, but what's wrapped around it. So that's the business models, where power lies, who's trying to have an influence. And we know technology in that context has a huge influence. So we can expect, I think we all probably know, that AI is going to have a huge impact on society. Again, not just because of the technology, but because of who's creating it, the powers around it, and the like. So your question was, how do we influence that to become a more positive future? And I think it's critical, really vital, that mission-driven organizations and individuals are shaping these more positive futures. So the first is, really practically, we have to critically engage with these tools to understand how they work, what the frailties are, what the benefits are. Not just say, oh, this isn't as good as I hoped it would be, or this is wonderful, but really critically engage with these tools and think about what it means for our practice and our communities. The second is, we need to think about how we can organize to have influence, because individually, being really honest, I don't think we have that much influence over big Silicon Valley tech companies, but collectively we can. I'll give you an example. In the UK, I mentioned yesterday, if you go to a Google search now, you'll often now see a generated summary at the top of your results before you then hit some links to go through. And since that has been a feature, the number of people who no longer click through has gone up by 52%. Now, medical charities, or medical information giving charities in the UK, noticed that the information in those summaries wasn't accurate enough compared to the information that they have on their websites. For example, an amazing charity called Asthma and Lung UK looked at the summary about how to use your inhaler, and they said, kind of anecdotally from their internal research, that the information given in those summaries was about 90% accurate. Now, for 90% of the people, that's a great result, right? You're getting accurate information about how to use your inhaler from this generated response. But from 10%, it's critically wrong, and it could be really significant. And they looked at how do they work individually to change those results, and they looked at things like generative engine optimization, GEO, rather than SEO. Like, how can they get their information privileged? And they weren't getting very far. But they worked with an amazing organization called Patient Information Forum that brought together lots of medical information giving charities. They looked at it across the sector. They looked at the impact on users who were looking for medical information. And collectively, they went to Google and they made their case. They explained the new harms that were being generated by these tools. And Google now no longer presents summaries for medical information. And that comes not just from individuals noticing it and being critical of those tools, but by sharing that with peers and organizing, and then think about how you take that information to power. Now, I think if we can replicate that model through this forum and through others, we can ensure that as mission-driven organizations, we're representing our communities, we're bringing information and data, and we're presenting it to the right people collectively. That feels like quite a practical thing to organize around.
That's a great example, a really great example of a practical way of influencing, that's actually happened as well. Let me bring to Elizabeth into the conversation as well from a kind of, again, a practical Mel implementation perspective. What have you learned from, AI in terms of how it helps through trial, error, failure? What are some of the foundations that actually need to be in place here that secure it as a tool and make it trustworthy?
Damien, I could speak from a practical example. At the moment, I'm working in an initiative funded by a group of foundations, and I involve advising in the development of a mail system. And the idea is to capture information from different projects that could contribute to the overall objective of these initiatives. Is in the global south, coming from different countries and regions. I see the benefits of working with generative AI. We have been listening examples during these couple of days of how much easier, efficient, and also cost-effective is to work with AI when we need to summarize reports, when we need to analyze data, qualitative data mainly. But I'm struggling. My expertise is more in the quant side of the mail. However, I'm a believer of mixed methods, but I see the limitations still from AI to understand this type of data. Yesterday, I was working with RStudio, with Python. I have been training Stata years ago, but now I need to upskill my skills. And AI helped me very quickly to find some errors in my syntaxes. However, I'm an expert that have been working in this field for years. You need someone to understand the type of variables, the data infrastructure behind, and identify problems. So I see the benefits, but I still find that there is a need for having humans, not in the loop, but in the center of all the work that we are doing. Am I still, in terms of the struggles that I have experienced in my work, is that AI still can deal with the complexity of the environments that we work. And I have been listening to Ali to explain beautifully all the challenges that we have working in FCAS, in fragile, in conflict-affected areas. And for example, I have been using some information interactive for this initiative with data and with projects that they are coming from Ethiopia. And you know that Ethiopia, in the north, they were facing a massive conflict. And we use this data, and I try to ask ChatGPT and other tools, even though uploading information about the context, to give us some recommendations in order to understand what that specific project coming from Ethiopia was not achieving the objective. And really, AI recommendations were very simplistic. I was shocked, and I tried different tools that all of us we know. So I want to highlight that even though AI is reducing inequality, because we have, all of us, we have amazing assistants, and that give us the opportunity to improve the quality of the data coming from organizations that they don't have big budgets, it still could create inequalities, because if I was not there trying to understand the complexity, explain what was coming from Ethiopia, I could have provided very simplistic recommendations to the people who were making very strong decisions in order to allocate budget, to, think about how they were adapting these projects in very complex settings. So my final reflection is AI could give us a lot of benefits, but it could decrease inequalities or shorten the inequalities, but also it could decrease it. And we are not serving, if we are not careful, the populations that they are working or that we are serving due to these projects, due to these interventions. And my final point will be in terms of the foundations. I think so that we still need very robust theory of change that capture the complexity of the environments that we are working. If we don't have a good theory of change that capture this complexity, we are going to make very light, very simplistic, superficial recommendations, and we are going to help the decision makers in order to make decisions that improve the life of the people that we are working. So in terms of foundation, I will still think robust theory of change that capture complexity, robust log frames with indicators that they are feasible to collect in these complex settings, putting in place policies, safeguarding policies, ethical policies in order to not jeopardize the individuals that they are being involved in giving us their views, participating as part of surveys of qualitative data that we are capturing in order to understand this complexity. So I will pause there. Thank you.
So it sounds a bit like to me, as David was talking about, it shines a light on the need for participation. It also seems to shine a light on the need for those basic skills, which we've known we've required, pre-AI, and we've all been trying to acquire them in different ways in terms of how do I build a theory of change? What's a good indicator? And those building block components of understanding your impact prior to evaluating it, prior to collecting data. It sounds like those building blocks are even more important now than, in the era of AI, because we can accelerate a load of rubbish. Basically, we can dress it up and we can smooth it over and it's going to sound convincing. And that's really the risk. It sounds almost like we're convinced but not convinced in some way. We're holding these two dynamics at the moment. And, but we've got some, also, I think what's probably coming across for everybody is that it's actually being used a lot, AI right now, in lots of different areas. And whether, and that's not always transparent to people, right? You can think, am I the only one using this? Am I, it's almost a sort of a dirty word emerging, isn't it? I'm using AI for this. But what's really becoming clear to me is just how prevalent that usage is. Dan, over to yourself. I mean, you talked before about we must engage with this topic. We must, not only know about, monitoring and evaluation and learning foundations, we need to know about the foundations of AI. We need to know how it works, figure out what those processes are. What are the risks of, just the sector following the tools? What happens? You pointed a picture of why we should do that, but what's the risk? What's at risk here?
I think there's a risk completely if there's no critical engagement. I mean, we just adopt stuff because everyone else is. There's a wonderful phrase from Rachel Caldicott that FOMO is not a strategy. Like fear of missing out is not a strategy. It's a really good point. It's not just adopt these because these things are available. It's like, how do we critically engage? So if we adopt them without thinking, we're going to start missing all the nuance, and we're going to create lovely looking outputs that read really well, but don't, as Elizabeth says, doesn't demonstrate the nuance or the real deep understanding. I think there's two other things that will be missed out if we kind of dive into this without being critical. So the first is we won't really be representing the communities that we serve. The way in which these tools are set up is they draw from their training data to predict how they should answer your query. what this community does and what brilliant charities do is they're generating new information and data that's not in that training data. It's incredibly valuable, but it's not known to these tools. So how we go about ensuring we capture the stories and the insights and the learning from new communities is distinct from the things that these tools can do. So it's so incredibly valuable. Then how do we use that information alongside the power of these tools? That's another whole thing for us to explore, and hopefully will accelerate the way in which we can provide support to charities or understand in more depth. But it comes from that real deep understanding. I think the last thing again is thinking about kind of the role that we play within society. So my perspective comes from charities in the UK. One of the roles that charities plays is a circuit breaker. We identify new harms and new opportunities quicker than many other parts of the society because people in need come for support. And in that simple interaction, we begin to identify new challenges or new harms that are being born. If we can then work as a community to aggregate that insight, then we have a chance to play that role, to go back to tech companies or to policymakers or to funders and say, this is the new thing we should be acting on. So this community's work in identifying those changes, it's outside of the training data. It's because we have those relationships. It's because we're working on the ground. That stuff is critical to then feed back into how these tools work better, into how policy is structured. So critically engaging rather than just adopting, ensuring we think about how we can generate this new insight that isn't in the tools, it's unique to the work that we do. And then how can we use that to ensure that as the tools are becoming adopted more and more by other people, they're being adopted based on the kind of the missions that we're working to.
Sounds good. Is there anybody listening on the other end of this conversation, do you think? You know, just, I mean, it means something to us. We can see the flaws and the risks and things going wrong. But is anybody, you know, what is the leverage here to actually have change happen?
It's a really great point. So let's picture a small organization that has very little money, but they want to understand their impact more. They want to kind of learn from what they're doing. Then now they have these tools that are going to help them do that, right? So I spoke to a CEO of a very small charity. It was a 3-person charity, and they said, I finally got a policy team, a comms team, a design team, a coding team that I could never afford. And they basically said they had a $20 a month license for ChatGPT. But the way in which they were using it was to have all this new capability. And we can celebrate that, right? Because that organization can now do amazing things they couldn't otherwise do. But similarly, we know that that's not good enough if it's replacing the expertise that we have in real depth, right? We don't just want to kind of get rid of these roles. We want to enhance what we're doing. So, sorry, the reason for speaking about that is other people are adopting these tools. So there isn't just this open door waiting for us to kind of figure out how these tools should be used and how we should shape society. This is the fastest adopted technology we've ever seen. There will be organizations who now think they can do impact evaluation on their own. There'll be those who can't afford our support and will be doing it on their own. So the role now is how do we support those? How do we kind of evolve our role? How do we support those who have now got these tools for the first time and give them some support? But how, again, do we kind of ensure it's rooted in our mission? And then what's the link in then to who's really listening? Well, being really honest, the people who are creating these tools, they're searching for to pay back their investors. Like Copilot costs $15 billion every quarter to keep alive. Like all these companies are taking on lots of investment trying to figure out the return. So they're not, like, let's be honest, they're not particularly focused on social impact. They're particularly focused on their business model. The big race is mass adoption, right? So how do we find those roots in? Well, we find those roots in because of the roots we already have through our links into government, through our links into funders and influencers, by organizing collectively and being allowed a voice. That example of patient information form is where we've organized well. So is there a group just waiting for us to turn up and say, we know the best? No, there's not. But if we can organize and build on our missions and build on our strengths as a community, then we can make sure there are opportunities to influence.
I just want to interject. I agree 100%, but I also want to highlight both Elizabeth and Dan's last points as they relate to us being the human prompt. In other words, we know that the prompt is critical for the result when we put in some sort of question or some sort of directive. As evaluators, I think, and that's what I think Elizabeth and Dan are actually highlighting as well right now, is that we need the knowledge and expertise as evaluators to influence and shape those questions. Otherwise, there's garbage that comes out. It needs to be more precise kinds of questions that we have, because we understand logic models, we understand theory of change, et cetera, and the social impact. So I think I just wanted to highlight that quickly. I can hear that in the thread of what we're all talking about, where the human prompt, the evaluator is the human prompt in this case, to shape a better question and a better answer. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. But Kilo has a comment.
Yeah, just to add to this, I've seen somewhere where the expression prompting as thinking. So it will be like more prompting. Maybe later on we'll be using like I will prompt something means I will think about something. But I also want to come back to this point about who is listening. I think I totally agree, and this is important also in our evaluation field. We've seen in a lot of the time for the history of the field, even 60, 70 years, or if you want to see it more. With the companies that invest in billions now, and hundreds of billions sometimes to even have one employee, they want to make profit. They're for profit most of the time. Yes, they have guidelines there, but similar to what happened with social media companies, actually many of those companies will acquire those AI ones without advocacy activism as much as we can and working with regulation with government. This will be almost impossible in my view. There's, also before we had a little bit more leverage in IMM or evaluation, people were actually interested in our work. Now, with I don't know the word we're going to, and perhaps World War III, I think in many organizations, even the word impact becomes a dirty word, not only equity. People are, some organizations, they're like, okay, but if we complicate things and think about impact too much. So our field, maybe I'm biased from what I've seen in a lot of organizations. I work as a consultant also for more than 10 years, and I've seen, but now the appetite for evaluation is a lot less. And unless we, especially with AI and it having to do all of this, if we don't have our value proposition as well as evaluators, will be very irrelevant very soon. So do I think, I don't want to be pessimistic again, but I think I'm saying that because we have to do advocacy, activism on behalf of our communities, working with other peoples and field. There is no choice but doing that. If we sit down and we're not on the table, they will decide for us. We have to be part of the conversation.
So one quick takeaway from each of you now as to, what people listening to this webinar, what can they do? What should they take away from this summit as something that they can practically move forward with to both, realize the benefit, because there's benefit there, right? But also at the same time have that sort of sense of a lightened awareness that there's more to this as well. There's more at stake. There's a societal influence happening here. What do people do? How do they manage both dynamics at the same time? What should they, it's a big question, right? But so one practical takeaway. I'll start with you, Elizabeth. What would you?
I would recommend as myself, experiment with a critical eye, be an expert in your field. AI, I treat it like a very cheap assistant, but I'm the manager, I'm the boss. I'm given the instructions, I understanding what this assistant is bringing to me, and I'm using my ton of experience knowing about this challenging context. So my recommendation will be relevant. Use your expertise, use your experience to give meaning to all this information that AI are producing. Don't be frightened. I think that this is amazing. For me, it has been an amazing experience after 20 years, have the opportunity to learn something new. So don't be frightened. And that's why we are here. We are a community to learn and to ask very silly questions that I think that they are not there.
Brilliant. I'm going to throw it over to you, David. I know you've got to shoot off in a moment. So You've got a big appointment.
Yeah. Thanks.
Over to yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I do have to cut out very shortly for the next meeting, but I want to reinforce what Elizabeth said. What I was going to say is that you need to play with it. Never mind all this great talk we're talking about the world and saving humanity. Play with it. Have some fun with it. Use it to write your letters much faster than you can write them. But look at them. As Elizabeth was saying, you're still the manager. You're still the expert. Now, vet them, make sure they're all right, modify, see how they can save you time. I'm on the beta team with the Google stuff, and we're learning how to do project stuff to systematize things. And they work. Not perfectly, but they work. So there are many new innovations coming out that'll be rolling out in the next few weeks, next few months, that are just phenomenal in terms of organizing your email, sort of organizing your drive, etc., and finding the information quickly. Obviously, there are dangers. Be careful. Think about all validating, of course, everything you're doing, but play with it. That's my real big message in a careful, thoughtful way, but use all the knowledge you have already. That's what makes this a powerful tool. By itself, if you ask, as we already know, a so-so question, a bad prompt, you get very poor results. That's where we just need to sort of have confidence in our own abilities and our skills and use those to drive our questions and our playful time in this zone. But I do have to cut out in about a minute or two. I'll just stay on for another minute. But thank you so much,
A great message,
everyone.
yeah. A great message. Play with it. Khalil, what would your message be?
I think the future belongs to not those who use AI, but the ones who know how to use it wisely. And this relates to the point about having content yourself. Of course, it helps a lot now with R, like Elizabeth said. That gives you the code, but it's not about the code if you cannot read the code, if you cannot even know what are this information is all about. So it is really important to keep building our capabilities as humans, as evaluators, sometimes as fathers and mothers, because we're asking now about AI, how to deal with our children, or and to ask AI how to act in many different situations, not only in evaluation or as a professionals, but to make sure that you're using it responsibly yourself and you're aware of this information and build the foundation within yourself, not to create dependency to the degree that we have all rotten brains that we are using AI for everything and we don't know the limits, because it can really be building dependency and then we don't have the ability to do simple things ourselves. Just in case, like in many fragile countries, if the electricity turn off, you still can write an email and you still can do a small task in life without AI. Thanks.
Brilliant. We still all need that. Yeah, thank you, David.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, appreciate that. Dan, closing words. What would your takeaway, practical takeaway be for people listening?
So great practical examples for how we can play. I think I'm going to take a slightly different route and say, start noticing how other people are using it and its impact on you and your field. So one of the questions I would ask is, regardless of your own use, what are the implications of other people using it? So does it change who's coming to you for support? Does it change how people are engaging with the stuff that you're writing or delivering to them? Does it change the questions they're asking? Are they trying to find other information? Is it impacting the environment in which you're operating? That's the first. Just keep on noticing that and sharing it. And the second one is organize and share. So share the learning, share that insight, and organize how you're going to respond collectively.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thank you all so much for your insights there. I think that was the big panel discussion. It went to plan, and I think we may not have answered all the big unanswered questions, but I think it shows that there is a thoughtfulness amongst this sector and this group of people, and I think it's reflected in your words that we have a role to play. And we should be playing that role and we should be following through with that. So I thank you all for your contributions, and we're going to close off the day. Thanks so much, everybody. We could show a little bit of appreciation. Yeah, I love that. Lots of hearts, lots of hands and thumbs up there. Super. Great. So I think we'll now move into our wrap up. Let me pull this back and just synthesize where we've got to today. For those of you who've managed to stay throughout for this second session of 4 sessions. So if you're really up for more, we've got a bonus day on Friday as well, and it's going to be a good one. But tomorrow we're really moving into an implementation zone. So what I'd just like to run through now, just to close off with, is a few items. I'm just going to share my screen so that we can see what's happening tomorrow. But I really thought that was a really terrific discussion amongst, and it kind of surfaced so much about how we're probably all, thinking about AI at the moment in terms of, its wider implications. And am I behind at the moment? Am I on top of this thing? This sort of fear of missing out is a real driver that I think the tech people are really pushing hard on. That if you're not there, you're in some way going to lose out. And I don't think it feels disingenuous. That it doesn't feel like the right impetus to move forward this work. It feels more like there's a responsibility, a collective responsibility, and that's where this shared piece of work in terms of this summit came from, is that there's an opportunity here that can really democratize people's access to knowledge. Having that room full of assistants who are, they may not be at the sort of PhD level right now, but they're going to get there. The trajectory in some areas, the incredible advancements are making. Coding, they are now the greatest coders on the planet, our AI friends. And it's going to happen potentially in other areas. So we've got a great opportunity to democratize and really make available to people, monitoring, evaluation, learning, and all the benefits that come from that. But we've got a role to play in it. So what I want you to take forward from today's session is, and I think it's the same as yesterday, responsible use is a workflow question, not just a tool question. And what I mean by that is it's about really understanding, what your theory of change is and how you knit together the foundations of a good M&E system. But it's also about context, and that changes what makes, what's appropriate to be doing, whether it's fragile context or not. Human judgment becomes clearer, not less important. Human judgment is clearly vital in this. We need to be the boss of this, not being led by it. And that verification must be designed into this process, as must our influence and our guidance more generally about the standards, about how this should look for the future generation of evaluators, and it all needs to be very much influenced. Tonight's experiment, we're going to drop a tile. It's an interesting one, and it kind of builds off the back of today's panel discussion, and we've called it judgment mapping experiment. And this is an interesting one. It'd be in the resource center for you to do, and it's really just about asking AI, and there's a sort of a series of prompts in terms of about your role as an evaluator, what it thinks your role will be. And so working through a process, and that what this kind of tells us is the sort of thought, the thought exchange role that you can have with an AI system. So it kind of shows you, if you've not already done this kind of questioning, how you can really use AI to kind of refine some of your thinking and use it as a thought partner in a discussion like, what is my role? So it's an interesting one. And again, if you go through the various series of prompts, and where AI might help and where you need to stay responsible for things, you'll have a really interesting and insightful discussion. It's part of that playfulness. That's why we've put this out there. Right now, where we're all at is experimentation. Tomorrow, we're going to take some next steps. We're going to go from sort of responsible use into some really concrete case studies. Something that's really come, I'll stop sharing my screen there right now. Something that's really come across clearly in this discussion is that we need to be involved in learning more and throwing ourselves into this AI space because it's here. It's already joined the room. So we're going to go through some real use cases, and we've got some great speakers tomorrow who are going to add even more richness to the conversation already. But we're also going to talk about what practical implementation steps you can actually take in moving forward, learning how to integrate this work into your own practices if you're an evaluator, or into your work as an in-house monitoring and evaluation officer, or whatever perspective you're coming at this conversation around impact measurement and management. How do you weave this information into your own practice in a practical way, but also get guidance, get assistance, get input from other your peers and your practitioners in terms of what are they experiencing, and how do we start to formulate all of that into a code of practice, standards of doing things. Because one thing's clear, it can be a really powerful tool and is already being adopted by lots of different people in different ways, but in very fragmented ways. So we're going to talk about some practical ways you can go forwards, and we can support you. That's what this Impact Intelligence Lab is all about. So tomorrow's another big day of the summit, and we've got the experiment. We'll drop the I have got a link to that experiment inside of the Impact Intel Lab there. Go and have a play with that. And tomorrow, we're going to move into this implementation and real life case study conversation. So have a great evening, everybody. And thank you so much for turning up and giving us your attention for yet another day. And I'll hand back to Graham to say and close us out.
Thanks, Damien. Fantastic panel. Just one thing to note, there was a discussion in the chat about gender within AI, and perhaps we can have a little bit tomorrow morning just thinking about how women can really input into this AI agenda. But anyway, we close day 2 with a fuller picture of what remains unresolved. Tomorrow, the question becomes, given all that, what does responsible progress actually look like in practice? Take care, see you all tomorrow, and thanks very much.